Hi, and welcome to Blade Balancing 101. And we're going to show you how to balance blades. In front of me I have a set of carbons that really need balancing, and a set of the new red and white pros that actually are pretty good, but we'll do subtle balancing on those. The things you'll need obviously is your blades. You're going to need a piece of outlined paper or lined paper, and that'll allow you to line stuff up as we do this balancing. Some different kinds of trim tape or tape that you can use for weight. Depending on how much you need, the align strips can actually work as well. And I like to use a main shaft, and I'll explain that as we go through it, but we'll use that to find our center of gravity of the blades. So bottom line, in blade balancing, there's two schools of thought. One is, and oh, by the way, I will be using the align balancer as well. Anyway, there's two schools of thought. One is, hey, put them on the balancer, let them teeter-totter, put the weight on the blade that's the light blade so that they balance. And, you know, to be honest with you, for the T-Rex with these small blades, that works a lot of the time. A lot of people, I've heard a lot of people comment that, oh gee, the smaller helis really are more critical on the balance, and that's actually not true. As you move weight out toward the end, it has a much more dramatic effect on a larger heli. So if I'm a little bit off on a tip here on a small one, if I move that out to 710 millimeter blades and I'm a little bit off on a tip, it makes a big difference. So for the T-Rex, you can get by with just doing prop style balancing with a teeter-totter and putting the tape on the end to get them so that they both teeter-totter the same. And what I mean by that basically is this is a simplistic way. Is take a prop balancer type device, put it on the blades, and tighten it up. Show you what I mean here just real quick. Tighten it up. Now what's important here is when you tighten these up, you don't want them tipped like this. You want them exactly opposite each other. So what I do is, as a matter of fact, let me tip the camera. What I do is get them as close as possible by holding one edge, by holding one edge up against the table and then adjusting this one until it's parallel with the table all along. Now, obviously this doesn't look too good on the camera due to the angles, but you hold one and you get it parallel, so when you're done, these are exactly opposite each other. And then, of course, you can use align cases or whatever you have to hold the teeter-totter, and watch for the low blade. As you can see, this set of blades is pretty well balanced, and I haven't even balanced them. Okay, my low blade's over here, it's tipping, but very subtly. I'd probably throw these on the bird, put the trim tape on each end so you can check tracking, but I'd probably throw these on the bird and be good with it. So that's what I mean by these blades are actually in really darn good shape as far as out-of-the-box balancing. But anyway, that is the simplistic, super easy way to balance. It gets you by most of the time. Really, it does. But what I'm going to show you in this video is how to do proper balancing if you really want to be strict about it and want to make sure your blades are balanced properly. And the way you do that is you have to do two things. One is we need to find the CG of the blade. Okay? Where is the balance point of the whole blade in the center? And we need to do that to the other blade and find where it is, and then find out if they're the same. And if they're not the same, then we need to put weight on the ends, or the end of the blade that is not the same. For instance, if this blade here happens to be heavy on the end, then what I'll do is I'll apply tape to the end of this until the CG of the blades are identical. Then we put them on our teeter-totter or whatever. Some people actually weigh them on a very precise scale, and whichever blade is lighter, they will apply the weight to get the blades the same weight on the CG mark. So that's what we're going to do in this video. So now that I've explained the basics, we'll go ahead and we'll do a set. Just so it turns out that these carbons I have could really use some balancing, and I'll show you why, and we'll get with that. Okay, so the first step is we need to examine our blades. Now, you can't just hold them together and assume that little areas like these tapers here match and that the end of the blades match. So when you put them on our, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be putting them on a teeter-totter and trying to find where the CG of the blade is, okay? You can't assume that just lining these little ends up like this is accurate. We need to examine the blades. We need to look at, see what we're looking for. So the best way is to put them together and run something into the, let me get the right tool here. Run something that's tight into where the bolt hole is and examine the blades. Now, take a look at this. Let me zoom in here. Okay, if you take a look at this, you'll see that our roots are not even close. This root's sticking farther out than the other. We got our blades aligned. We can look at our tips and we see that ever so slightly the tips don't line up. And if we were going to look at these, if we're going to look at these curvatures here, they're pretty close. But depending on how this is off, you may, or what you will want to do, is put the blades in opposition like this and run your shaft through there again. And we want to make what we call a registration mark. This will be a mark, whoops, this will be a mark that we will use to line the blades up so that we know where the bolt goes through. Because remember, this goes on the head. Where the bolt goes through, that the distance from these holes to a common mark that we can use to find a teeter-totter point is the same. So what you do is you put your pin through there, make sure it's not sloppy, and you unscissor them. And we're going to just go, okay, about halfway. What we want to do is just put a little tick on each blade with a pen, a Sharpie or something, right at the same place where our scissors meet, and that's our registration mark, okay? So this will be used to determine whether these blades CG line up the same or not. Now this is what the lined paper is for. We need to get things lined up. If we're looking for a teeter-totter point, we certainly don't want our blades at an angle to the teeter-totter because it just isn't going to work. So that's why we needed the registration mark. And that's why we need the lined paper. So we're going to put our main shaft on one of the lines here and get it as straight as possible. And then we'll put a blade and line it up with one of the lines on the paper, and this tries to get us all 90, and we get it close to the teeter-totter point, okay, and lined up with the lines. And then we take the next blade and we do the same thing, and we align our registration mark, the marks we drew on the blade, so that we know the hole to the mark and the hole to the mark is the same. Now what we want to do is roll the main shaft. We got our main shaft 90, our blades are squared up. Not quite, because if they're not, it will throw this finding the CG off. Alright, and we make sure our registration marks are good. There's our registration marks, and we're good. Now we roll the main shaft. As you can see, this one's already tipping back. Now I'm going to roll the main shaft forward. This one is now tipped down. Our CG is way off. Well, let's see how much. Wow, quite a bit. Look at that. So this blade on the tip is heavier than this blade. We need to apply weight until, with the registration marks aligned, these tip at the same time. So rather than spend a bunch of time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some of my tape. I'm going to apply little bits of it at a time until I get this so that the registration marks are aligned, everything's 90, and both blades tip at the same time, and that'll give us our CG line. And so I'm going to go ahead and apply weight to this tip until I can get there, and when I come back, I'll show you how I got that. Okay, these blades were really bad. As a matter of fact, if I had to apply this much tape to an end, I'd probably send them back to a line because they're really bad. So once again, we're trued up with a line. Our main shaft's true with a line, so we know everything's square. Our registration marks that we made are exactly opposite each other, and now that I've applied the tape, you can see both blades tip at the same time, okay? So that shows us that we now have the CG of both blades the same, okay? So now what we want to do is we want to mark that CG. Now, you don't have to be totally accurate, but find where the teeter-totter point is and just put a mark on the blade. And the same thing on this blade. Okay, because this is where we're going to apply our weight now when we go to find out which blade is heavier. So we got our CG the same. Now we've got marked our blades. We know where the CG of the blades are, and we're going to find out, use our aligned teeter-totter tool or prop balancing type tool, and we're going to use that to apply weight. And so I'm going to go ahead and mount the blades. We'll come back and we'll see which one's heavier. Okay, so now that we've got our CG the same with tape on the ends, and we've got our marks on our blades where the teeter-totter points are, we need to find out which one's heavier. Now again, in the beginning of this training video, I showed how to, matter of fact, let me tip the camera again. I showed that it's important to make sure these blades are in opposition of each other. And what I did is I held the trailing edge over here up against a table, see, up against a table. And then what I did is I measured the distance from here to here and from here to here on the tip so that this was parallel with the table. If you got any tip in here, it's going to throw off the balance, okay? So now that we've got them exactly opposite each other, we're going to put our balancer on there. We're going to find out which blade's heavier. Okay, look at that. That's interesting. The blade, now these blades are really have turned out to be really bad. The blade that I added the tip weight to get the CG right is also the lighter blade. It's tipping on this blade here, over here, which tells me, now normally when I do this, and when I do this kind of balancing, usually the one I add tape to on the end also winds up to be the heavier blade, and I wind up putting tape on the CG over here to get the blades weigh the same. But in fact, this is not the case. So this is a very unmatched set of blades. Now I need to apply tape on the same blade that I put the ends on to get them to teeter-totter. So what I like to do is rip off a big hunk, because we don't know how long we need, and we put it on the CG of the blade, not enough to interfere with the teeter-totter effect, and we put it on there. Boy, I'm still going to need more tape than that. That's quite bad, actually. So I'm going to have to take some more tape. Anyway, actually, rather than spend time on video doing this, I'm going to keep putting tape on the CG here until these blades teeter-totter. That's the idea, or until they balance, until when I let go, no blade drops on either side. So I'm pretty close now with that length of tape. It's going to need a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. When I come back, you'll see what I wound up with. Okay, we're back. Turned out I needed one complete round of tape here, and that basically got it balanced. So we've got a huge amount of tape on the end to get the CG, and then we even had to add tape to the same blade to get the weight of the two blades the same. And as you can see, put it on the teeter-totter, and it's pretty right on there. Now, if you get a little tiny bit of movement, you can keep sticking little pieces of tape, but the problem with little pieces of tape is as follows. You want to make sure when you're applying tape, you're wrapping it around the leading edge. If there's any edge of the tape sticking up on the blade as the air is traveling over it, it'll try to peel it off. So you want to make sure that all edges of the ends of your tape are with the air direction. So if you wind up having to add little pieces, you're going to be adding them on the leading edge. So, you know, roughly right. If you're just getting a little tiny, like you can see, I'm just getting a tiny amount of drop where this blade's still a little bit lighter, I'm going to say that's good to go. I'm not going to mess around with applying a tiny little bit of tape here and then having it come off later and losing it anyway. Okay, so I'm good to go there. That's basically blade balancing 101. And that's what you do to try and get a set of blades balanced. Again, just to summarize, when I showed you these were pretty good. I'd probably just throw these on the bird. You know, if I spun it up and I got vibes, then maybe I'd take a look. But I'd be willing to bet you money these will go on here without any vibes. These blades here would have been really bad. With the amount of weight that I've had to apply on these blades, they would have been really bad. So, bottom line, again, that's Blade Balancing 101. I hope this was helpful to you, and enjoy.